Hello, dear students, and welcome back to yet another installment of our exciting course on strategic management in educational settings and organizations. And this time I'm going to talk about actual tools that may help you design and implement strategic reasoning in organizations. So what are we supposed to do today? Well, first of all, what are strategic analysis tools and why do we need them? Well, these are basically frames of mind, if you will. We can actually refer to them as guidelines, formal guidelines that guide our thought process to lead us through the strategic reasoning, analysis, and planning stages. All right? And these are basically aimed at, first of all, helping us think systematically about the organization and its environment, internal and external, provide shared ideas and mutual collaborative language so we can work together across different organizations, across different teams to promote our goals. Very useful tools, but we have to be careful because every smart guy or girl comes up with an idea. Every organizational counseling firm, every organizational development team comes up with an idea. And I have to say that not necessarily every one of them is great. So I will start with the best ones and then I'll go to other popular ones. And you can feel free to mix and match as you need, right? According to the situation, according to what you have to do, according to the information that you have on hand or time that you have on your hands. So let's start with the perhaps the most successful and probably the only template that is very successfully and very empirically supported by studies, research, academic work. And that's the SWOT analysis. The SWOT analysis stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The idea is basically that if you need to do some strategic work, prepare. Don't just come up with ideas. Don't just say, okay, we have a problem. Here are a few ideas. No. Analyze the existing situation. Analyze the internal and external environments of the organization. And if you pay attention, then strengths are basically what are we doing great? What are we strong at? What are the assets we have working for us, if you will? Weaknesses is the exact opposite. What are we not so good at? What do we suck at, basically? What weaknesses do we have? And then opportunities are what events or changes may present a chance of development for us. And threats, of course, the exact opposite. What changes or trends, especially in the external world, external to the organization, that is, pose threats. So they may threat our existence, our success, our development, and so on. Pay attention that strengths and opportunities are positive elements, weakness and threats are negative. And then strengths and weaknesses are internal in the organization, and opportunities and threats are external, outside of the organization. So we cover all bases, if you will. Strengths are what we have working for us. Opportunities, what potential for development and continued success do we have? Then weaknesses is what we have to get over or solve or come up with a solution to. And while threats is how do we avoid them or how do we minimize them or turn them into opportunities. The basic idea is this. Gather a team of stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders, it's basically employees, customers, management, and if you have other people relevant, so for example, municipalities, government, etc., get representatives together and make them work together to map the situation. What do we have working for us? What are the threats and opportunities and so on? Fill out these matrices, if you will. Then, after you're done analyzing the data, you can look, analyzing and writing, documenting the data, then you can look at the matrix and ask yourself this: strengths, what will help us continue, and what do we prefer, or what do we give priority to? Weaknesses, how do we avoid them? How do we minimize them? How do we get over them? Opportunities, can we use opportunities to overcome our weaknesses? And threats, how do we turn threats into opportunities? That's the big idea here. If you can do that, you've done a very good and very effective strategic analysis and planning process. Now, I gave you, the whole thing in like 5 minutes, but basically this should take days. Okay, first the data collection. The team goes home, does some homework, comes up with what do we know about the organization? How do we do this? What are the problems we used to have? What are the problems we're having now? What changes are happening in our immediate environment? Can we divide them into threats and opportunities, and so on? Then you fill in the blank spaces. You fill in the matrix. And once you're done, you start analyzing. How do we play on our strengths? Then how do we overcome weaknesses? Look at your opportunities. See if you can work with them. See if you can use some of your strengths to overcome the weakness. And threats, can we turn them into opportunities? Another approach is called the SOAR analysis. Still pretty popular, although much less scientifically supported by empirical data. Basically, it says the following thing. If you need to work on strategic plans, that is, analyze, make the plan, implement it, you have to apply the 6 I's of collaboration. 1 is initiate, start working. 2, inquire, investigate, collect data. 3, imagine, in other words, envision. Remember vision? Envision a better organization, envision a better reality for your organization. Innovate, make new ideas, come up with new functions, come up with new ideas and directions for action for your organization. Inspire, in other words, convince others that you want to do this, that we want to do this together, and implement. And when we're setting these I's, we have to work on our strengths, build on what we do well. Opportunities, what chances for development and success do we have around us? Aspirations, that's the vision. What do we think we need to achieve as an organization? What do we want to do? And results, how can we measure and assess our results? You say, hey, Leo, it's quite similar to the SWOT. Well, it is, but if you will, this only focuses on the positive side of the SWOT analysis. It basically does not bring into consideration the threats or weaknesses aspects of the analysis. Why? They believe in a more constructive, more uplifting approach to analyzing and implementing strategic plan. And it's okay. I don't think it's necessarily, worse than the other one. However, I must admit this again, that the SWOT analysis is the one that has enough evidence supporting its effectiveness. One more idea for, thinking, the SCORE model. This is a model that's, provides an alternative to the traditional SWOT analysis, and basically does this. Identify strengths, identify challenges, choose and raise all kinds of options, in other words, alternatives for action, respond to what you get, and make sure that you implement in an effective manner. Okay, so SCORE. Basically, if you will, it's a similar approach. It does bring in challenges, that is the negative side, but for example, it completely disregards the idea of weaknesses or opportunities. It's basically what are we good at? What are the challenges we're standing up against, and how can we overcome them? So it's a very good model if you have very specific problems that you need to solve in a strategic manner. Last but not least is the gap analysis. That's probably the most veteran approach. It's coming from, it grew up in, industrial engineering traditions. And it's basically the idea of identify what we're doing now, identify where we want to be in the future, identify the gaps, and make a plan to close those gaps. But to make this work well, and again, I repeat, because I know it goes very fast. These are very complex actions conveyed in, encapsulated in very short terms. So I'll repeat that just so it, dives in and sinks in. So identify the things that you want to measure or assess. Look at what you are or where you are now. Look at where you want to be in the future. Identify the gaps between what you want and where you are, and then decide how you're going to address these gaps, how you're going to close these gaps. To do this, we need to create SMART goals. We need to make a system or come up with a system that will help us decide where we want to be. That's the strategic vision part, right? How do we do that? Well, the gap analysis comes up with the following acronym: SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. Now, let's explain each one of them. Specific. We cannot say we want to be better. That's not enough. Nobody will know what to do with it. We have to be specific. For example, we have to react faster to clients' complaints. All right? It needs to be measurable. In other words, faster is not good enough. We need to react to customer complaints within 24 hours. That's measurable, right? Achievable. Can we do it? If I'm saying that I want to raise my children on the moon, but there's no technology to do that in the next whatever, then I'm setting myself for failure. And that's a very bad idea. So I need to make sure that my goals are, aspirational, good for us, but attainable, that we can get them. Relevant. I will need many people to work with me, collaborate, invest effort, energy, time in promoting those goals. I need to make sure these goals are relevant to as many people as possible within my frame of reference, in my organization, in my community, whatever. And time-bound. I need to set milestones in which I decide by next year, we will get at least 80% of our customer complaints taken care of by or within 24 hours. Okay? So again, SMART goals. What do we want to achieve? Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And then I'm looking at where I am today. And then I identify the biggest and most painful gaps, and I make a plan to close these gaps. What kinds of gaps do we have? Well, anything might work. But usually, since we're talking about very specific analysis, then it could be market gaps. So we have competition, or we're not positioned in the market where we want to be. Strategic gap. We're not aligned with what we want to achieve. We're doing one thing, but we're, aspiring to do something else. Profit. Well, less relevant to us. But, for example, even in non-profit organizations, we do want to keep, the balance sheet balanced. And last but not least, and that's probably the most relevant in education organizations, that's the skill gap. In other words, do we have enough talent? Do we have enough human capital to do what we need to do? And that's always hard. And a lot of the actions that may result from such analysis would be either recruiting new personnel, new staff, or training the existing ones, usually combining both. What do we want to remember out of this? First of all, I will ask you to do some SWOT analysis in the future as part of your assignments. But basically, what we do take from the all of these methods is this. Take a snapshot of the existing situation. In other words, we cannot plan forward without understanding what led us to this situation and understanding what the situation is. Then make sure you have access to valid information Don't just use your opinions or feelings. Get access to information. Work in teams, collaborate, and exchange opinions, analysis, points of view. Imagine where you want to be, and that correlates with our idea of vision. And then, only then, plan your actions. All right? So, even in times of pressure or crisis or stress, we need to be systematic. Doing strategy is doing something systematic and effective. Otherwise, it's better not to do it. All right? Please go over these ideas again. This is, a unit in which a lot of things are said in a very concise frame of time, and I do want you to understand these and maybe remember one of two or two of them. So please go over it again, especially the SWOT analysis. All right? Make sure you understand what's being done during this analysis, and if you have any questions, I'm always one email away from you. No problem. Ask, and I'll do my best to answer. And in the meantime, see ya.